maybe we're going to use... Oh, I know what it is. All right, hold on one second. This is the point, is that I forgot that from our mastermind, which was fantastic, by the way, that I had, like, taken everything down in my studio. So, like, I popped up here. I was like, oh, I'm just going to shave and take my time, and then I'll go up there and get... Popped up here, like, 4 minutes to showtime. And my studio wasn't put together. Okay, so here we go. Looks like I got the right microphone, and I put the studio together in record. So, welcome. Glad to have you guys here. So, the mastermind was amazing. I had the best time, and I think it was probably the best mastermind that we've ever had. It was phenomenal. Everybody came with it, brought such good gives. It's been 2 weeks, and, Mike Powell gave us so much stuff to do with land, and I've already contracted another 20 acres, kind of, because I got it contracted for a friend of mine, kind of got 200 acres done off of inspiration that we got from him. It was incredible. And then Sean Brown, winner of Best Give, gave the most freaking phenomenal give. And Leslie, my partner with Leslie and Cole, has already gone out and found a bunch of ways that we're going to do that. So, again, I can't encourage you enough. If you are looking for a way to take that to the next level, take your career to the next level, join a mastermind. Doesn't have to be mine. It's just that mine's the best. CreativeCashFlow.com/membership is where you can look at that. So, but today I want to talk about something that kind of came up at the mastermind. So I went to breakfast the day after, on Saturday morning. I went to breakfast with George and Gary out of North Carolina. And super cool guys, by the way. I'm very happy to know them. And we got to talking about stuff, and I was like, you know what? This would be a good topic, right? Because one of the confusing points when you're doing creative deals is, where is a deal no longer a deal? And in the academy that I've got for Creative Cashflow members, we do have a rules of thumb. I've gone over the rules of thumb with you guys on Grant Teach Me Something previously that you might want to go check out because those are very helpful. But there's some kind of edge cases that allow us to do deals that other people can't do, and that is when deals are underwater. And there's more than one way to be underwater. I want to point this out, and I also want to say you can still make money. Even if your deal is underwater, you can still make money. But you have to know why you're doing that deal, okay? And this is where it kind of gets missed for most people. And I tell this to my students a lot, and I think anybody hopefully can repeat this to me, that I say, I don't care what you do. I just care that you have a reason behind what you're doing, right? This is one of those situations. This is one of those things where it's you may choose to take on a deal where you owe more than is owed to you. But you got to have a reason to do that. So this is going to be a 3-part series because you can be underwater with equity, you can be underwater with cash flow, you can be underwater with interest rate, okay? I'm starting with equity today because I love equity. That's the reason that I'm in real estate, is to get the equity out of deals. So that's where I wanted to kick us off. But we are going to go through each of the other scenarios in these upcoming weeks, and I think y'all are going to be very interested to see this. So let's run a scenario. That's what I'm going to start saying. Let's run a scenario. Let's say that you get a lead where, hey, they owe to the bank $90,000. Let's say they owe $95,000, okay? But it's a RV is $100,000. So you have to figure out, hey, is this something that's worth me doing? Because once I sell this thing for $5,000, I'm going to take a 10% down payment. From that 10%, it's going to leave me with a $90,000 note receivable, okay? So just to kind of define some things for you guys, to kind of get us all on the same page about what we're seeing, let me make sure I'm showing you the right thing here as I pump this to you. Okay, cool. We are going to use some of the same phrases. When I say note receivable, we are talking about your wrap note, the note that's coming in, all right? So note... let me change this down to be smaller. Receivable. I'm going to say that equals our wrap note. In the context of today, we are only going to be talking about wraps. In this series, we are only going to be talking about wraps because the implication of being underwater on cash flow, equity, or, what was the other one? Interest rate, implies that you have underlying debt that you're wrapping around, okay? So note receivable may not always be a wrap because you can do first lien interest or first lien loans to people on this stuff, but in our context, it's going to be note receivable. I'm also going to use the word underlying lien. Okay, so this is our debt. This is going to be the debt that we are paying off. I also want to clarify, as I like to do, that I will always say seller, referring to the person selling to you. I will always say buyer, referring to the person buying from you. Okay? We are in the center of this conversation, and that is what we are going to be looking out for. So we have a note receivable coming in at $90,000 in this scenario, whereas we have an underlying debt of $95,000. So what I would love to see is, can you tell me, okay, we've got several people watching, of course, can anybody put into the comment sections here a reason why it might be okay to take down a deal that you are underwater, okay, on equity? What is something that could be a true statement of a deal that you're looking at where you might be underwater and it would still be a good deal? I want to kind of flex your brain out a little bit. Ike is taking notes on here. She's going to share all these comments with me as she usually does, so she will comment on this. Also, I understand that I'm on quite a delay, so I'm delaying a little bit here so that you guys have time to hear the question and type your response. But I do want to challenge you a little bit. Let's think about this, okay? We want to get our minds into a place where we can take deals down that nobody else can. Santiago, love it. Santiago comes in on YouTube, says cash flow. Now, Santiago has become more and more sophisticated as time goes on, you know, and I've loved seeing him grow. We've done, like, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 deals together now. Santiago Luna is such a baller. We've JV'd with him, which, by the way, if you want to JV with us as well, CreativeCashFlow.com/JV with me. You'll submit the deal. We'll take a look at it. My partners will call you within usually that same day, if not the next day, and we'll help you take that down. But we've done a lot of that with Santiago, and he's absolutely right. Okay, so we're upside down on equity, but we're making like $1,000 a month on this deal, right? That's a scenario that might mean it's worth taking the deal down. We have Jordan McCoy saying that the cash flow makes sense to take a deal underwater. Absolutely. Our Nedmundo says seller has a low interest rate. That's a good one. I'm going to bring that one up too. And Jason Cordova says cash flow. Okay, so it's good. We got a lot of people looking for the cash flow, which I love, right? We like to say cash is king, cash flow is king. Let me give you this scenario just to make my point on cash flow is king versus cash is king. If I gave you a $1 loan, or I'm sorry, other way around. You lent me $1. Okay, so you now have a note receivable for $1, but you lent it to me at like 600,000% interest rate on a, 80-year loan. What would that look like? Well, you would have a $1 loan, $1 at 600,000% interest rate, if it'll let me do that, on a 50-year amortization. No solution. Yeah, I don't know what it is. Oh, well, maybe I have to go longer. Maybe I have to give it a... Oh, I'm sorry. I said... what am I wanting to do here? I'm trying to see if the second one... it doesn't really matter. Let's say 1,000 years. Just see if it comes up with a solution here. Nope, no solution. Okay, so I don't know what the deal is. But the point being, if that $1 loan netted you like $600 a month for the next 50 years, that's awesome. You only have $1 of cash flow or of equity. You are only worth $1 on paper. However, you're making whatever I said, $600 a month, $1,000 a month for the next 50 or 60 years. That's awesome. That's the power of cash flow. That's the power of interest. That's why cash flow is king, right? So I do want to encourage cash flow. But I also want to encourage equity. That's why I'm starting with the equity example here, is because I like equity. That's why I'm in this, right? So Tom Nguyen, or I should say it better, net positive cash flow, Brady asks, is the new loan behind on payments? Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not going to tackle the arrearages on this one necessarily, Brady. We might get into that here in a second, but that's a good question. How far behind are they, right? Then you start talking about those rules of thumb that I've discussed. So let's run a couple scenarios, okay? We're going to take the suggestions that you guys made and see how that might work. And I'm going to show you how, hey, this deal might still make sense, and I'm also going to show you where you might get tripped up on it. That's going to be what I'm going to try and do with all three of these examples, is how could this make sense, or how do you think this might make sense, but it's actually going to screw you up in the long run. So let's start off with this, okay? So I'm going to come in here, and I'm going to create us a $90,000 note. This is going to reflect the note that we have as our note receivable, okay? So it's $90,000, 9.5% on a 30-year loan. We're going to have a $756 payment coming in, all right? So let's pop over here and let's take some notes here. In our income, which I like to do as green, we are going to have a note receivable at 9.5% on a 360 payments, which is going to equal us $756.77 a month in income. So let's run some scenarios here. Now, we want to, that's weird. Why did that change over? Now, am I using a different calculator? That's weird. Why do I have different values in there? Now we want to look at our $95,000 underlying lien. Okay? Now, there's a couple of suggestions that we got here, right? Specifically, yes, of course, cash flow is king, but how do we achieve that cash flow? How do we know that we can take this deal over and have cash flow other than simply just looking at, hey, I'm getting 756 in and I'm only having to pay 200. Yes, obviously that's going to create our cash flow, but how do we know the scenario that's going to make that happen? So we've got seller has low interest rate. I like that one. Let's start there. That comes from R. Nedmundo on YouTube. So let's say it's a $95,000 loan on our underlying lien, but for example's sake, we're going to say it's a 0% loan. Now, what if it was a 0% loan and it had a 5-year term? Right? Here we go. Now we have an income of 756, a note receivable of 756, but our underlying debt is 1583. It does not have cash flow, and it does not have equity. Right? Another suggestion that we get specifically for how do we achieve that cash flow. Oh, actually, nobody else gave us a. Okay. So the other thing is just to think about it like the calculator, right? If we're going to achieve something, we've got to get, and as a reminder here, right, we've got, let me move my little weatherman strip over here since I am late to my game setting up. Weatherman, this way I can see. Okay. So we've got on our calculator 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different slots that need to be filled for us to make any kind of calculation, for us to know if we actually have a deal or not. Now, because of, in our context, I'm going to go ahead and say, hey, 99.999% of the time, it's going to be on a full about the FV. We're going to call that one 0, almost always. So if the final value is 0, then we only need to know 3 of these other items to find the 4th. So if we're looking for a scenario that might make this make sense, we know one of them. We know PV, right? We also know that the other one needs to be under what? Right? We've got a clue here of what we are looking for, don't we? We've got a clue of where we want to be, which is, this becomes your decision. Right? This becomes how much cash flow are you going to require to do a deal? And that number has changed for me over time. Again, I don't care what your number is. I care that you have a number. I don't care what you do. I care that you have a why behind your what. So if your number right now is $50 of cash flow makes sense to you, that makes sense to you. However, what we're looking at in this specific scenario is a situation where, hey, I don't have equity at all. I'm actually underwater on equity. So am I going to go into a deal, excuse me, where I'm underwater on equity and I'm hitting my minimum cash flow? Tell me, comment here, okay? I'm going to pose that to you. I'm going to say that you have in your mind a minimum cash flow amount that you require. And then I'm going to say, now we're looking at this deal that you're analyzing. It's $5,000 underwater on equity. Once you get your note payment in, you're $5,000 down. Okay, let's ignore the like, hey, you sold it for 100, you got 10 down, so there's 5,000 extra. Of course, if that $5,000 was available to you, boom, pay that 5,000 towards your underlying lien, get it paid down to 90. Now you're not underwater anymore. But we're gonna act like you had like realtor's fees or something that ate up that $5,000, closing costs, that kind of stuff. So, back to the original question here, where Cole says yes, Tom says underlying lien has no balloon payment. Now I legit forgot the question I asked you. Oh, somebody comment. Ika, what was the question I'm even answering or getting people to answer here? If you could put that in there for me. Yeah. If you would do this deal if you're hitting your minimum cash flow. Okay, so this is our wonderful it depends answer, right? Because it depends. It really depends on you. Here's a situation that we're going to run. We're going to say, in that context, we've got a note receivable of $756 a month. Now, if we have a minimum cash flow requirement, is that minimum cash flow requirement enough to say, yeah, it's worth doing a deal if I'm underwater? Tom says, yeah, if I'm netting $350 a month, that's what I want on my minimum cash flow. Okay, so maybe if you hit $350 a month on this deal, that's going to make sense to you. Cole says yes, because I know that he has a conservative minimum cash flow, which I love. But if you are going to come into a situation where you are underwater on equity, you have to understand that you are playing with fire, okay? Because at some point in time, completely out of your control, you may get a letter from a title company that says that you've got to pay off your underlying lien because your wrap buyer went off and sold their property. Or your wrap buyer goes and does a refinance, okay? Which would mean you have to give them that free and clear property. You have to give releases at that point in time. And in order to do that, you're going to have to reach into your back pocket to make this happen, right? So you have to be okay with this. Now, the situation that I gave you right here is a fairly small net negative. It's $5,000. You should be able to be in a situation where $5,000 is not going to kill you if it comes through. So if you are making your minimum of $350, then like, cool, right? Like I'm going to get my cash flow and eventually I'm not going to be underwater. Why do we know eventually I'm not going to be underwater? What would be the thing that's going to lead us to understand that? And Susan Tierney, miss you too. It's good to see you. Says interest spread. Exactly, right? This is the key to our world in creative financing. It's all about interest spread. Okay, now I say that. Next week, we're going to do underwater on interest. I'm going to show you what to do if your underlying lien is at 12% and your wrap note is at 8%. Does that deal make sense? We're going to talk about that next week because it does sometimes. But right now, let's look at how that's going to play out with our interest spread. So if we've got a $90,000 note, okay, and let's say, a $95,000 note. If it's a $95,000 underlying lien, that would imply to me that this person has not had that loan for that long if we're selling it for $100,000, right? Like they're basically what it's worth, so they haven't been paying on that very long. Typically, I see the most sub-twos come out of either 2 years of payments or 8 years of payments, and then kind of somewhere in between is where the rest of them fall in. I would say I probably see 40%, like 20% have paid for 2 years, 20% have paid for 8 years, and the other 60% are like somewhere in between here or even with more time paid on it. But let's say that they've paid for 2 years. So they've got 28 years left, which makes their remaining term $336. Okay? Let's use a realistic interest rate. Let's say that they have a 5% interest rate on that. All right, cool. Now all of a sudden we have a wrap note, and I'll do red for debt out. Now we have a wrap note at $95,000. At 5% over a, what was that, 336 amortization, which means that we are at what was it? Oh, it doesn't want to show me that. We are at $525.90 a month. Okay, so if we are at $525.90 a month, oh, sorry, I hit the wrong button here. That means that we essentially are making $250, $230, right? Okay, does that make sense to you? But Cole just asked the $10,000 question. What is the equity in 5 years? What is the equity in 10 years? What is the equity in 15 years? Cole is, for those of you who don't know yet, Cole is now my business partner, Cole and Leslie Key. We finalized the documents last week or so either congratulations or condolences to him and her. I'm lucky to have them on board. They're great. So yeah, exactly that. What is the equity spread? So let's look at it. If we have a 5% loan on this, let's look at our amortization. So I'm going to click on that orange button. I'm going to click on the amortization, and it's going to bring up my amortization schedule. Now, this is useful. This is good to look at. However, one of the things that I find makes this easy for us to do comparisons is if you hit the share button, it brings up like a full PDF version of this. And a lot of people don't notice, but if you look in that bottom left-hand corner on your screen, there's this thing that says loan date. Okay, it is right there. On that loan date, we're going to click it. And I like to set that to a January 1st of some sort. Okay, so I like to go January, and we'll say January of 2021. Sure, why not? January 1st, 2021. Now you got to hit the done in the bottom right-hand corner, and boom, it adjusts your dates for you. A lot of people don't realize that this calculator can do that, and it's a really helpful tip for if you're trying to find a legit, like, hey, where are we in this loan? If you know when it was originated, you can change it there and then just go to today's date, and you'll figure out where you're at that loan. But that's a little bit of a side story. The reason why I like to do this is that it makes it nice and even so that when it splits up, you'll see payment number 12 right here tells you 2021 totals, 24, 36, that kind of stuff. It'll give you all of your annual stuff, right? So this is our underlying lien. So I'm going to hit share. I'm going to bring this up. I really like using this app called PDF Expert. It has been very good to me. And we're going to look at this amortization schedule, and then I'm going to do the same thing for our wrap note, our note receivable. We've got a $95,000 note. At 9.5%, we have a $90,000 note for 360 payments, which means it's $756 a month. I'm going to go quickly through and do the same thing that I just did for y'all, which is change this to January 1st of 2021. And then I'm going to share that out to PDF Expert so that we can kind of A/B test this, okay? The question becomes, when you're looking at a deal where you are underwater in principal, the question becomes, how long are you going to be underwater with principal? If life just goes on as normal, as scheduled on the amortization, how long are you going to stay in that situation where you're underwater? So what you do is you take your amortization schedule and you kind of look. And Cole has a good way of doing it. I like going down and just saying, okay, where are we at 5 years? Right? Let's just like look at 5. Let's skip down to 5 years and see where we're at then. Because if we are already no longer underwater, then I can come back closer to see, okay, when did we stop being underwater? Or if we are still underwater, we're going to go out further. So I'm going to look. This is our wrap loan. Payment 60. We are going to still owe principal of $86,687 or we are going to still be owed, I should say. That's our income. That's our note receivable. On our underlying debt, which again, you can see we got 336 payments, 5%. On our underlying debt, we go out 5 years to payment 60, and we still have a balance here of $86,320. That's very interesting. So we basically hit the nail on the head of it's gonna basically be 5 years before we get before we are broken even on that. Because if payments are made as scheduled in normal succession, they will owe us $86,687. We will owe our bank $86,320. So that's basically there, right? So the question then becomes to yourself, in this scenario, we're only $5,000 under, right? In this scenario, we're $5,000 underwater. If I'm making $300, $400, $800 a month on that deal, okay, maybe I roll the dice. Maybe I understand that in the next 5 years, if this person goes and refinances or sells their house, I'm going to have to write a check to make up the difference for what they owe me and what I owe my underlying bank. But the most I would ever have to write is $5,000. That's something that you should just have in your checking account ready to go. It's not going to be the worst case scenario. And if you've made whatever, $400 a month for 60 payments, what is that? Right? 400 times 60, something like $24,000. So if they refinance and you've got to write that check, maybe your net gain on that asset goes from 24 to 19, right? And I'm simplifying here because guess what? If it's in 3 years, maybe that check is only for $3,000 versus 5, right? Because you're going to have this equalization happening. But why is that equalization happening? What is the thing here, right? This is the key to the interest spread that Susan so wisely called out here just a second ago. This is something that not a lot of people truly internalize and truly understand about a huge benefit of this business, which is our interest on our loans that we are paying, our note payable, our underlying debt, should be at a lower interest rate than our note receivable. Kind of duh. It's okay. Next week, we're going to talk about if that's not true. But what that really means is our debt is being paid off quicker than our income. Therefore, over time, our net worth on this deal is spreading. Okay? This is exactly why I am a fan of, notes more so than rentals. I like rentals. Don't get me wrong. I poop on rentals a lot because I think people get into rentals without realizing what they are. I think rentals are great. However, I will say it, what I've boiled it down to is I think a rental is great as long as you don't need to make a single dollar on that asset until the loan is paid off. That's when I think rentals are great, or if your rent rate is twice whatever your debt is. Those are the two scenarios where I think you make actual money on those rentals. Otherwise, the money you make on the rental I think needs to get counted as bonus because you're just kind of holding out. You're getting the depreciation, you're getting appreciation, that kind of thing. But many people who are proponents of the rental side over the note side are going to bring up the appreciation of that rental property, okay? They're going to say, look, but over time, my net worth is going to grow with this rent property because of appreciation, because properties appreciate. And I don't disagree with that. But what I do disagree with is that is a definitive and separate kind of argument from where the notes are because guess what? Our net worth grows over time too. Because if we have debt at 4%, that's 10 years into their payments, every payment I'm making to that is killing the interest over here. Killing the principal over here. Whereas we're starting payments, 360 or payment 1, if you look at it that way, with our note receivable, and they're barely knocking away principal. So over time, that interest spread grows, and it grows in a calculated manner that I'm not having to wait on what does the market do. And I'm not saying, well, it is probably going to go up, but there's a chance that it goes down as well. There's not a chance that it goes down as well. It's calculated. We may not get as big of an appreciation bump as somebody in the rental space does, but think about all the time that it takes to manage a manager on rentals. Think about all the time, if you're going to self-manage especially, that it takes to do that. My viewpoint is the amount of time spent managing your manager, the amount of time spent managing the property itself could have been spent gaining more assets that have calculated appreciation returns over time through arbitrage, through paying less interest than you are being paid. If I know that in 5 years my equity goes from $20,000 to $40,000, I know that I've got a $20,000 equity spread that's coming to me, assuming these payments get made on time and, all that kind of stuff. So, if I'm going to compare that to one rental property that may have, what did I just say, a $20,000 appreciation. Let's say that there was a rental property and we're going to say we want a $100,000 appreciation out of that rental property in 5 years. Do I think that in this next couple of years or so, I could buy 5 more assets with notes that are going to do that same thing? So I'm focusing on my acquisitions and on my setting up and origination of paper instead of focusing on the management and back-end work that comes after having done that, right? If I can do 5 more, that means that I've gotten $120,000 out of calculated note appreciation in that 5 years versus the $100,000 of, hey, it's kind of a speculative, I hope that my rental becomes worth this much. Does that make sense to you guys? Is that something that stands out to you? Let me know. Drop in the comments. If there's something here that gives you a particular aha moment or that you're liking here, and please drop that in the comments. It helps me to know how to help you guys out, right? What is sticking out and what is not. So we just pointed out, right, one scenario where being underwater on equity, note equity, is okay. We're going to say, all right, hey, I'm making whatever it was, $250 a month, rounded. And within 5 years, I'm going to be broken even, and then my net worth will start growing from there. So I'm rolling the dice that they don't cash out on this loan within 5 years. But that's not the end of the story, is it? Right? Because whenever I calculated this, I was like, look, if you get 5 years out of it, then great, and you would have made $24,000 in the meantime. But what point in time does that start to be true? You have a note for $5,000 less than your debt, do you not? And you're going to make $225 a month on that note, okay? So a very loose calculation, because again, things are going to change over time, but I'm not going to get a little bit too far, but a little bit of a loose calculation to achieve understanding a general idea of where you really sit on this deal is, hey, I'm going to be down in note equity by $5,000, am I not? And I'm going to be making $250 a month on that. So as long as this thing doesn't pay off within 20 months, I should be good. You see where I went with that, right? Like, you're going to make $250 a month, which means that in reality, you are not profiting until you've made that $5,000 note equity up. Well, this is a 20-month period. It's not even 2 years. That's a pretty good chance that you're going to hit 2 years without a refinance or a sale, right? But let's take that one level deeper, because, that's how I like to do things, is to overthink them. And I think that the people who follow us also, they want to know. It's not like this stuff affects your everyday, but it's just good to know. Let's look at payment 20 here. Well, if we look at payment 20, what's our principal balance there? Payment 20, $92,293. We will have, they will owe us $92,000 on payment 20 still. And we will owe payment 20, $89,000. So at that point in time, we're only $3,000 down. So this is why I say it's a little too complicated. I'm not going to spend all the time. I'm sure there's some kind of logarithmic example that tells you if you use the, whatever pi times this, that, or the other, that you can find exactly when that is. That doesn't really matter. I don't want to overthink this, even though I'm already overthinking this. I'm giving you all these examples, right? But what I'm saying is, look, you're going to make $5,000 by payment 20. If they paid off in payment 20, you're going to have to write a check for $3,000 to make up for that equity spread that you don't have, which means you will have still netted $2,000 of a net positive, not counting your down payment on that, right? So, hey, 20 months out, do I think that they're going to refinance or sale within 20 months? Probably not. However, what if they do? Am I screwed at that point in time? Nah, because the worst I'm ever going to have to write a check for is $5,000. So I'm gambling $5,000 to say, am I going to make enough money to pay for that? But what if your question wasn't $5,000? What if the question was, you're going to be $30,000 underwater, right? Then now you have a real question you got to ask yourself. Because, hey, if they refinance tomorrow, you got to cut a check for $30,000 and you're only making $250 a month. That's where the issue starts popping in, right? This is why I'm recommending, guys, just think about it. I gave you that scenario. We walked it through in a fairly simple term, and I want you guys to run these exercises as homework. I want you to spend some time on the calculator figuring out scenarios, exporting these amortization schedules, and seeing at what point in time does the story change for me. Because let me show you the other extreme example. I gave you an extreme example of like, hey, you're only a little bit underwater, you're making $250, whatever. Can somebody tell me why I might be okay with being $30,000 underwater on a deal and not having like ridiculous cash flow in it? Okay, that's the question. Can somebody tell me a situation where being $30,000 underwater on the note equity and having a 250, let's use that number still, cash flow, is going to make sense? Well, what scenario could make that happen? Santiago, thank you. He says gold nuggets. I appreciate that. Here's what we're looking at. We're looking at the fact that you can do a deal that other people can't. Because most people would say, hey, this doesn't work. You might be needing to look at a short sale. You might be needing to look at that, the other, whatever. But remember, there's 5 slots in this calculator, are there not? Each one of those slots is an opportunity for you to make money. Think about it like that, okay? If you're going to do a deal, you've got to make money somewhere. Now, with every variable comes another story, right? So it's like, well, what if the only thing I have is that there's an interest spread? Well, that doesn't always mean that you're going to make money, right? What if the only thing I have is note equity? Okay, then you've got note equity. But are you underwater on cash flow, right? What if the only thing I have is cash flow? Okay, but are you underwater on note equity? Here's the situation. We have a note receivable of $90,000, $756 a month. I'm going to run a scenario where we're $30,000 underwater on this, and we only have a minimum cash flow, 130. And this honestly, this probably won't actually work on the calculator, but I'm using this as a scenario because it's a real life. There will be a situation where this works. So we'll see if it works with this example. Oh, I said 30 under, and I've made 130. This may work on the calculator, it may not, but I'll explain to you what I'm doing here. Okay, so we're $30,000 underwater on our note. So our underlying debt is at 120. Our note receivable is at, I guess it would have to be 125. Our note receivable is at 95,000. No, I was right. Sorry, I'm just confusing everybody because that's what I like to do. Remember Cole's very wise look of, what's the equity in 5 years? What's the equity in 10 years? What's the equity in 15 years? Okay. I'm going to see if I can do something here. Maybe I have a $100 cash flow. I don't think that this is going to work, but we'll see. Maybe I have a $100 cash flow. But let's say it is at 0% interest. We have 15 years left on this loan. So good. This does work for what I wanted to show you. Okay? We have 15 years left on this loan. I am hyper motivated to take over sub 2 on something that has more than 15 years paid. My team had a directive of, look, if you've got a deal that's letting you to take over sub 2 with no money out of pocket and we're 15 years in on the payment, it's almost positively a green light. Because here's why. If I go to my amortization schedule and I pull it up like I've been doing, show you guys, we'll go to January. We'll go to January 1st so that we can compare apples to apples. We'll say done. Okay, if I, stop it, that's not what I wanted. Gosh darn it. I would love to be smart, guys. If I could just do things the right way, that would be really nice. Okay. If I come into this loan and I look at what we're looking at in 5 years, actually before that, let me just point this out. If I look at this loan, obviously we've got a 0% interest rate and we're 15 years in, just under, right? So there's obviously in our head, there's probably a good chance that this works, but why is it? It's because every payment that we're making, that full 656 is going straight towards principal. Meanwhile, if we look at our incoming debt, the note receivable, their first payments, only $44 of the $756 payment is going towards principal on their side. So if we look down at payment 60, in 5 years, we already know they owe us $86,687. Now, just as a recap of this example, we started off $30,000 underwater, am I right? We started off $30,000 underwater with only $100 in cash flow. But if I go to payment 60 on my underlying underlying lien, dude, all of a sudden in 5 years, we actually broke through that barrier entirely. We started off $30,000 underwater. Now we have an underlying debt at $81,000. They owe us $86,000. So in 5 years, we already have $5,000 in equity, and we made $100 a month, which would be what, $6,000? Is that right? 60 payments, 100, yeah, $6,000, right? So at that point in time, if you make it to year 5, if you count the cash flow and the equity appreciation, now you all of a sudden you got $12,000 in there. You started $30,000 underwater. So what does it look like? Let's go to 8 or 10 years, right? Let's go to payment 120. Well, in payment 120, I should be going down here, but I'm going on the one above it. It's really payment 119. I get that. Payment 119, 120, they still owe us $81,000. Where are we at payment 120 here? $41,000. So if we made it another 5 years, now we got $40,000 in equity. This is only a 15-year loan. If we look and we say, okay, what is my potential of total earnings on this deal? Which I like to take it this way. This is hey, there's too many variables. People can refinance, people can sell, maybe they fail and we have to foreclose on them. There are too many variables to fully account for everything. But as a quick and dirty look of does this deal make sense, one of the things that I like to do is I like to look at what is the total payment, right? Like when all is said and done, I will have made cumulatively, I will have paid $120,000 and $48. I don't know why it goes up to that when there's zero interest, but it did. Yay, amortization. We will have paid $120,000. Cumulatively, if this thing goes the full 30, which is not uncommon, we will have received $272,437. So, this deal has a potential. What was it? 232? 272. This deal has the potential to make you $152,000, and it was underwater by 30 grand to start with. So now you have to really think about these things and really consider. Now, one thing that we showed earlier that was quite interesting is like, hey, in 5 years, we already have equity built up, right? So then if you're like really trying to consider what is my actual situation going to look like on the on the wrap, let's go out to year 3. Right? If we're starting 2021, it'd be 2, 3, 4. They owe us 87. 2024. We owe 88. Okay? Within 3 years, we will have made up this $30,000 deficiency and be underwater by $1,000. Right? How sweet is that? Raise your hand if you would have by default said, absolutely, I will take a look at any deal if it's 30 grand underwater. Drop that in the comments. If somebody had put you a lead in front of you that said you can only sell this for 100 grand with a $10,000 down payment, but the seller owes 120, would you have done that deal? That's the question. I'd love to know. The question's answer has to be it depends, because in this situation, yeah, if they owe 120 at 0% and only have 15 years left on it, boom, we got us a deal, right? If they owe 120 at 10% with 28 years left on it, nah, it's not going to work. But this is why it's so important to understand this calculator inside and out. This is why it's so important to be able to log into a deal and dissect it creatively from every situation. Our Nedmundo says, yeah, I would now. LOL, yes, exactly, yeah, right? I hope so. I hope that you will look at this, and I hope that you guys make some extra money off of these classes, right? I hope that you start to say, dead deals aren't always dead. What it takes to do a deal is a willing seller. At the end of the day, that's the most important thing that you can have to do a deal, is a willing seller. If you've got a seller who wants to sell, a reasonable seller that wants to sell, you've got the potential for a deal to happen no matter how crummy things look. But you've got to look at the full picture. And I love that Cole inherently looks out 3, 5, 10 years, right? Because that factors in. We are in this for the long haul. We are looking for our legacy through creative finance. Alpha says, I might have, but most definitely I will now from over at YouTube. Yep, I hope so. I hope so. You just got to throw it into that amortization schedule and see. And so that's why one of those things happens, right? When I get a question on a deal analysis and they say, hey, they owe 120, the house is worth 100. I don't think it's a deal. My first question is what? What's my first question? If I'm looking at a deal that is obviously and clearly underwater, what is the first thing that I want to know? You tell me, right? With what we just looked at, what is the first thing that I wanted to know? The first thing that I want to know is how long have they been paying on it? How long is left? That to me is a great litmus test, right? Because if they owe 120 and they still owe it for 29 years, there's a very small chance that that's going to work. But I've had it happen where it's like, yeah, they owe 120 and they have 10 years left. Sorry, I need to turn my ringer off on this thing. I didn't realize it was still on. There's a very good chance it would work because I know that I'm not going to weigh at principal. If they've got a long amortization left, my second question is what? Has to do with the calculator. What's the interest? If it's like a 0% interest, maybe it's going to work. If it's like a 2% interest, maybe it's going to work. I've substituted a couple of deals in the ones because they did loan modifications back in 2009 and 11 and stuff like that. So ask all the questions, right? Ask yourself the full picture of what's going on. See if there's a way to get in there and make money, and how long is it going to be until you make money, and what is the risk? You know, in our very first time that we did our mastermind, I was going over some pretty complex ways to get around risk in the first in-person mastermind that I ran. And one of the guys was like, dude, you are super risk adverse. And Josh Dees popped up. He's like, nah, man, Grant's not risk adverse. Grant is risk aware. And I love that. I love that. I think that's a great way for us to live. We don't have to be risk adverse. I've put it all on the line lots of times. I say lots. I mean, I've probably put it all on the line. Come to think of it, about every 2 years, on average, there's a big bet that I make. But I make it as a hypothesis, and I make it knowing what the situation is and what my possible downfalls are. Okay? In this scenario, you're 30 grand under. There will maybe be a situation in 6 months or so where you have to write a check because they refinance or sell that property. Can you do that? Is that feasible for you? Do you keep $50,000, $100,000 in your account ready to hit these situations? Right? That's a question for you to answer. And if that is cool, then yeah, you get to take advantage of a deal like this. But even so, who can think of a scenario, and I'll finish with this because I know we're coming up on it, but who can think of a scenario where, no, I can't afford a $30,000 hit if this were to come up? How can you still do that deal? How can you get into this deal that is going to make good money? There was $150,000 worth of potential profit on this deal that you're $30,000 underwater on, right? If you don't have the $30,000 to be prepared for that, what is an option that you can use to still get into that deal and make that money? What about JVing with somebody? Because there are other investors out there that have $30,000, $50,000, $100,000 in their bank account and are happy to take that risk because, yeah, we got a potential of 120 or 150 to come at the end of this deal. I'm still making a positive cash flow, and I'm just gambling that they're not going to refinance or sell in the next 3 years, right? Well, and our Nedmundo says that you can sell the note. You can't sell the note because you're underwater, right? They owe 90 to you. If you sell the note at discount, maybe you only get 80 for that note. Now you're even further underwater, right? Like if you've got to be able to pay that off. And so that's where the JV is so powerful because there are other people, myself included, that will work with you on a deal if it makes sense. Somebody else might be in a different financial position for you, but you got to be able to know. You got to be able to know when you're presenting it, hey, this deal kind of looks like crap, but I ran it and like within 3 years we'll be good. I'm just not comfortable with my cash reserves to know that if this doesn't go that way, that I'll be able to afford that payoff. And so I need somebody in my corner who can, right? That's one way to get it. And thanks, Santiago, giving me my commercial here. JV with GK. Maybe that's what I should have called it, right? CreativeCashFlow.com/JV with me. That's how you can put it in. And Cole will actually take a look at that lead for us, give you a shout, see how that works. And Cole, he says, take this and use it. This is the kind of stuff we learned after joining Grant's group, completely changed our business model, and we did more deals. I got to meet Cole because he was actually one of my creative executives. Him and Leslie joined the Creative Executives Mastermind Q3 of last year, and I've just watched them grow and do such a phenomenal job over this time that when I decided to split off with Ronnie, I approached them about partnering up too. We live near each other. We get along really well. Our kids get along really well. It's a great situation for both of us. But I got to see them firsthand take their business from, having been in some of the other big name groups that you've heard of, done a couple of deals, and within their first quarter with me, they had done like 10 or 15 more deals. Like, it's crazy how good they did at applying these things. And I say that to A, brag on them, and B, encourage you. Guys, this is real. This is actual stuff that you can go take to the streets and make money with, and I want you to do that. So I hope that this opens your eyes up. I hope this opens your eyes up to like, oh man, there's even more behind the creative curtain than I even originally realized there was, even though I knew there was a bunch there. So as I said, this is a 3-part series. We did equities today. We're going to do interest next week, and then we will do the cash flow the week after. But it's going to start making more and more sense to you guys, right? You've got to know every piece of your profit center, and you've got to know that if one is down, the other has to be up. That's as simple as that. It's what they call it in like the mortgage industry, which I'm blanking on it right now, but it's like, okay, they have, a bad credit score, but they have enough cash in their bank to pay this entire loan off if it came down to it. David says, I want that shirt. Yes. So there's a shirt. I'm gonna hawk a website for you guys. It's called something. Oh, it's like Redbubble. Redbubble.com. I love it because I think it's Redbubble. Because this has nothing to do with real estate, but I like it because it's just artists. It's just independent artists that put their art up on Redbubble, and then those people will take their art and put it on a shirt and put it on a bag, put it on a drink holder thing, whatever. So you get to support local artists, or independent artists, I should say, and get some comfy, nice shirts. So that's where I got this one. Anyway, again, I hope this opens your eyes up to that. Please, Igor, I'm glad that this was good for you. I'm glad that this works for you guys. I really want to help you guys out. Again, my name is Grant Kemp, CreativeCashFlow.com. Check us out if you are interested in getting a mastermind of like-minded people who are looking to, create their legacy out of creative financing and just understanding, hey, along the line, we are going to wholesale. We are going to have rentals. We are going to flip. We are going to do all these things. That's this group. This group is made up entirely of people who are just used to being the one in their group that's more successful than everybody. And everybody in this group is like so chill. It's not like I'm better than it. It's just like, hey, it's just part of life. They just get it. Like they think about things differently. They've always been super successful in their circle. And it's really nice to get a bunch of these people together to have each other to lean on, right? So if this fits for you, if this is something that you're looking to do, check us out, CreativeCashFlow.com/memberships. I would love to have you on an interview. Let's see if this is a good fit for you. And if so, let's move forward with it. Other than that,